Time. Is it truly the fire in which we burn, or is it a friend who walks with us throughout our lives? That is a question that us as humans have pondered since the beginning of time itself. And time travel is something that sci-fi fans, specifically Star Trek fans, have also been pondering since the beginning of the genre itself. So today, in honor of Star Trek Picard Season 2, who is using time travel as its primary jumping off point, I'm going to discuss what I believe is going on with time travel inside of Star Trek canon, and how I believe there are two, but now a third way that time travel is working within this universe. So let's begin with some examples of how time travel has worked within Star Trek in the past. First up, we have the slingshot maneuver. Now, this involves a spacecraft traveling around the sun at specific velocity, specific speed, specific vectors. Basically, it's something that's hard to do. You need somebody that's a genius like Spock level to figure this out. We have seen it done in the original series here in Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, and we have just witnessed it a couple of episodes ago in Star Trek Picard Season 2. This is a practical way to do it without any advanced technology, obviously, aside from the technology they have within the Star Trek universe already. So it doesn't require any magic technology to be invented. Just have to be smart, use a ship, use a star. I think you need to use warp, and there you go. The second one, the Guardian. Now, we have seen this once in the original series, once in the animated series, and once in Star Trek Discovery. Now, this is a, for lack of a better word, a TV-type device where you could view the passage of time and actually eventually pass through it into that time. Now, this leads me to what I believe, these first two examples at least, to be the first way time travel works in the Star Trek universe, a linear timeline on which you could travel back and forth to change that timeline without splintering into another timeline. But more on that later. Another time travel device we have in the Star Trek universe isn't so much a device itself, and it could be caused by an accident, it could be created on purpose, but I'm going to term this interphasic portals, ruptures in space-time, tunnels through the fabric of space-time, things of that nature. Now, I'm using this example here from Time's Arrow. This was a tunnel through time from one planet to another, one time to another, so the present-day 24th century TNG time frame to the past in the 1800s, late 1800s on Earth. This race of aliens used this portal to go back and forth to our past to feed on human energy, and it was played off as a plague of the time, so that didn't really arouse any suspicion. There are a few other examples of this in Star Trek, and I think this is also passageways through time within the same time period. Well, the timeline, I should say. Obviously, we've got the transporter. We've had several instances of the transporter causing time travel in Star Trek, almost never on purpose. It's almost always an accident through the introduction of radiation, chronotons. What was the one they used before chronotons a lot? Started with an N. Why can't I remember it right now? Anyways, it'll come to me later. Or in the instance of Deep Space Nine, it was chemosite as well as an explosion plus the transporters, which led them to travel back in time to the Roswell incident, where Quark, Nog, and Rom ended up becoming what we know as the Little Green Men from that incident. Odo was there as well, however, they didn't know that at the time, and this was also traversing back in time through an accident with the transporters on the same timeline. Next, we have the Orb of Time made by the prophets, who, as we know, are non-linear beings. They view time, for lack of a better concept, as one concurrent event. They don't understand beginnings and endings. Everything for them is working on the same time. I, for lack of a better word, I don't know how to explain it. It's really hard concept to understand if you are a linear being. But this is basically a device that they've gifted to us to allow linear beings to skip along the timeline, in essence, at will. So this is kind of a cheat code to allow people to bounce back and forth through time, to exist time as a non-linear entity. Now, we also have seen the Borg use time travel, and this is an interesting event because this seems to prove all of these types of time travel exist on the same timeline. This is the Borg in First Contact going back to stop First Contact. Now, after the Borg initiate this trans-temporal anomaly, whatever they called it, the Enterprise is caught in the wake, and they see outside of the anomaly that everything on Earth has changed. The Earth is completely assimilated by the Borg. They are protected because of the shielding, because of this temporal wake, and that is very interesting because this is showing time has been changed around them. It is not a divergent timeline being created, and with sufficient shielding and protection, you can survive a change in time. Now, we have also seen the Nexus, and the Nexus isn't so much time travel as it is a seemingly break in reality of the current timeline, and because of that, you are able to step out of the Nexus basically anywhere in time that it has existed. So this is what I think some sort of fracture in the timeline. Perhaps it was created because there's been so much shenanigans with time in the Star Trek universe that it is kind of an artifact, a leftover of a breakage in time that's just traveling throughout time. For me, I don't know. I'm kind of viewing it as those little things that are floating through your eyes. They're not really doing you any harm. At least I don't think they are. I hope not. But they're kind of remnants of something your body is breaking down because of a trauma or too much something you've gotten in your eye. So I think of it more as an after effect, probably of so many temporal shenanigans. Now we also have the Mannheim effect from the beginning of Star Trek: The Next Generation. This was less of a time travel machine, less of a time travel in the conventional way. It wasn't like I decide I'm going to step through this and go to the future or the past. It is more of a device that's causing time to hiccup, to repeat itself. So it could be in the future something that was developed into the time travel technology we've seen. I thought I would bring it up because it was a significant time travel episode in the history of Trek. Then we also have Q. Now, Q, similar to the Prophets, doesn't really seem to be viewing time as a linear series of events. He kind of has access to time as a whole. What we don't know is Q existing and the Q continuum itself existing only within our timeline, or is Q multiversal? That is to say, let's say the Mirror Universe and the Kelvin timeline. Those are three distinct Star Trek universes as far as we're aware. Is the same Q able to access and, involve himself in those? And is it the same Q, or is there three different versions of the Q continuum for each universe? That we don't know. So Q does seem to be involved in time travel. He rarely seems to actually create the time travel. He seems to more help characters when there's already something going on, or he creates pocket universes like we saw in his second appearance with those vicious animal creatures, as I think Worf called them, and when he created Sherwood Forest. Those weren't actual temporal changes. Those were more pocket universes he was creating. We have seen him do time travel, but I don't know if he's actually moving people through time or just creating illusions or facilitating the travel through time when something else is already going on. So he's a bit of a wild card. We also have the Starship Relativity, and now we start getting into actual future Federation technology that can change and manipulate time. We also see this with Davis from Enterprise, a couple of agents from DS9. Now, these characters, I believe, have the ability to change and shape time based on some sort of a predetermined way that the universe in our timeline is supposed to occur. So whether or not these are orders being passed down from far in the future, if they've got these offices shielded from temporal changes and they can view changes and divergences in the timeline, I believe they are tasked with keeping time more or less in the right ballpark. So I'm going to give you an example later, but for right now, that's what I think they are here for. On the inverse of that, we kind of have their counterpart, the Krenim time ship. Now, they were using time in a weaponized manner to basically, ensure their supremacy over their neighbors and to bring back everything they lost and make themselves the greatest in the quadrant. This is kind of a similar thing, but used less benevolent. Of course, I try to use a big word and screw it up. Then we've got the technology from Voyager's Endgame. I believe they said this was modified from Borg technology. Pretty much seems to work in the same way, creates a fissure through space-time, and I think it's pretty much in line with what we've seen before. Now we start getting into the third prong of what I'm viewing as the time travel pantheon for Star Trek, and this is the Narada from Star Trek 2009, and this is a good place for me to go over my 3 points of how time travel works. So, we have our primary main timeline, and that is that. We have our primary normal multiverse, and that is that. Then, we have our third corrupted multiverse. Now, those are the 3 bases of time travel in Star Trek. So, I'm going to say most of the time travel we've just gone over, the slingshot, the guardian, the orb of time, all of those things are you traveling backwards or forwards along the same timeline. That can be changed, that can be affected, that can be overwritten, as we've seen multiple occasions. And let's take a look at, let's say, yesterday's Enterprise. We saw a change, we saw that change corrected, but there was a lingering change with Tasha Yar being in the past. What I think is going on here is the time agents have a prescribed way things are supposed to work, but they don't worry about the little things. They worry about substantial divergences from the way time is supposed to play out. So if there's a little thing, think of it as like water going down a river. There's a small rock sticking out of the water. The water kind of goes around it, but it's still ending up in the same place. Tasha Yar ending up in the past, yes, that makes some significant ripples in that time period, but is it significantly changing the course of the universe? Probably not. If it was, if she ended up becoming a mass murderer who blew up half the quadrant or something, that might significantly change things to a point where it would have to be corrected. But because it wasn't, what we saw in TNG Season 1 and 2, and everything after yesterday's Enterprise, not necessarily the same timeline, but with significantly lowered changes so that it doesn't matter. So the changes that were made, no problem. Now we also have the multiverse. I believe the multiverse is naturally occurring choices. So for instance, let's say I have lunch today, don't know what I want as a sandwich, turkey or ham. I go with turkey. I am in the turkey timeline. Another timeline, I had ham. Naturally occurring branching point, creating a multiversal branch. I cannot then go to that multiversal branch, kill myself. Well, I don't know why I said kill myself, stop myself from having that sandwich and rejoin that branch with the one where I had turkey. That is no longer possible. I can travel backwards in time in my own timeline, have myself have a ham sandwich, and that will continue forward in an altered, or as the Popcast coined, a corrupted version of the timeline. But if that's not a significant change, I'm not going to get visited by the time ship Relativity or Daniels from Enterprise to make me change that, because all things said and done, things still play out the same. Now, if I go back, make myself have a ham sandwich, choke on it, and die, and I'm very important to live to the universe, then maybe they would come back and stop that. But those are the 2 points I think the difference is. Now, Star Trek 2009, I believe, introduced a third problem into the mix, and that is the unnatural or the corrupted multiverse. So normally, if you go back in time and create a divergent series of events, they're corrected by time agents, or they're not substantial enough to need correcting. In 2009, they did not create a divergence within their own timeline. What they did, they created a corrupted multiversal branch. And I think the reason behind that is whatever the hell red matter is. So once you introduce red matter, that creates a corrupt multiversal branch, which then cannot be reintegrated into the timeline of where it came from. So you cannot then go back and make the change where the Narada did not do that, because the red matter basically violently ruptured through and created what I'm thinking of as a corrupted branch, a corrupted version of the multiverse. So you've got your 3 prongs: naturally occurring timeline, that you can then alter back and forth, but you can't make a branch to a multiverse. You've got a multiverse which is normally occurring. You make a decision, you create a branch, that's it. Then you've got a corrupted multiverse, such as Star Trek 2009's Kelvin timeline, and I believe this is probably what created the Mirror Universe, and that is why the Mirror Universe and the normal Star Trek universe are so easy to go back and forth between, because they're actually basically the same timeline that's been forcibly ruptured into a branch that cannot be reintegrated, but they are still intrinsically linked together. So those are my 3 main prongs of how time travel works within the Star Trek universe. I'd love to hear what you guys think, and going forward, we'll see if there's any contradictions and reasons why there needs to be a 4th prong to how time travel works. But until next time, do all the YouTube things and computer and program.